It was the year 1803, and the eastern shores of Japan stretched out in a quiet rhythm of waves, fishing boats, and small coastal villages. Life here was steady, shaped by the sea and the turning of seasons. On the beaches of Orai, people carried on their daily work, unaware that a story unlike any other was about to take root in their history. This was an age before steam engines and before Western ships truly pierced the shogunate's borders, when the Japanese archipelago held tightly to its traditions, and even a whisper of foreign presence was enough to unsettle hearts. Yet one calm day, something strange appeared on the horizon. Not a ship of the kind anyone had ever seen, but a vessel so odd and so out of place that it seemed almost as though it had drifted in from another world. The fishermen were the first to notice it. Their eyes, trained to recognize the shapes of sails, of trading junks, or even the occasional foreign frigate from far-off seas, paused in confusion. This vessel did not rise with tall masts or long wooden hulls. It bobbed, rounded and compact, gleaming oddly against the water. It looked like nothing that belonged to their familiar sea. Villagers soon gathered along the sand, pointing, murmuring, trying to place the image before them. The thing was moving closer, not with the grace of a ship sailing under wind, but with the slow drift of something carried by the tide. As it drew nearer, its form became clearer. The craft was not long like a boat, but wide, with a domed top, circular in shape, like the hollow half of a great seashell turned upside down. Its walls seemed reinforced, banded with something metallic, though no Japanese vessel at the time used such construction. To some, it looked like an enormous rice pot, sealed shut against the waves. To others, it was a giant drum, drifting silently toward their world. Whispers passed between villagers. Was it a foreign ship, a wreckage from another land, or something stranger still, sent by the sea gods themselves? Children clung to their mothers' sleeves, staring wide-eyed, as the men debated what to do. The rules of their time were strict. Foreign contact was forbidden, punishable even by death. Yet curiosity tugged at them. The craft settled against the sand with the tide, rocking gently, almost waiting. Its surface reflected the muted light of the sky. Some villagers said they could see what looked like glass windows, small but distinct, as though this strange vessel might hold someone within. Carefully, they approached. The air was hushed, heavy with the sound of the sea. One man touched the outer walls, and reported that it felt like a kind of metal he had never handled, smooth and cold. There were seams, as though pieces had been fitted together, yet the design was seamless, more advanced than the wooden joinery, familiar to their world. Carved into its surface, some said, were markings, lines or symbols they could not read, nothing resembling Chinese characters or Japanese calligraphy. To these villagers, the symbols seemed like messages from a distant place, a language beyond their knowing. As they peered closer, the sound of movement came from within, a stir, a faint shifting, and then from inside the hollow ship, they glimpsed something utterly unexpected, not just objects, but a figure, a person, a woman. She sat within the strange craft, framed by the dim light filtering through its small windows, and the villagers drew back in shock. Her skin was pale, almost luminous in the coastal air. Her hair, unlike theirs, was tinged with a reddish hue, flowing over her shoulders in waves. Her garments shimmered with fabrics the villagers did not recognize, layered and fine, patterned with styles unlike any they had ever seen. In her hands, she clutched a small box, and though she moved with calmness, she held this object close to her chest, as though it were more precious than life itself. When she spoke, the villagers leaned in, straining to hear. The sounds of her words carried softly, but the language was unfamiliar. No one among them could understand. It was not the tongue of nearby provinces, not Chinese, nor any dialect they had heard in trading ports. It was wholly alien, flowing with syllables that resisted meaning. The villagers, baffled, tried to respond, but she only shook her head gently, as if to say she could not comprehend them either. The silence between them filled with questions that no one could answer. Who was she? Where had she come from? What was the purpose of this strange hollow ship? And what lay inside the box she protected so fiercely? Some whispered that she was a foreign castaway, washed ashore by fate. Others, more superstitious, murmured that she was a spirit, perhaps a messenger from the gods, or even a fox spirit in disguise. Yet whatever she was, her presence in that moment was undeniable, as real as the waves lapping at the sand, as mysterious as the symbols etched into her craft. As the villagers stood in awe, the tide shifted again, rocking the vessel gently, as though the sea itself wished to reclaim it. The woman's gaze lingered on those who surrounded her, calm yet unreadable. The villagers hesitated, unsure whether to welcome her, fear her, or drive her away. This was how the tale of the Utsuro bune began, with an object adrift on the water, carrying with it a mystery that no fisherman, no villager, and no official record would ever fully explain. The hollow ship had arrived, and with it a story that would echo through the centuries. To truly understand the strangeness of the Utsuro bune story, we must first step back into the Japan of 1803, into the world that shaped the eyes of those villagers who stood on the shore. This was the Edo period, a time when the country was ruled under the Tokugawa shogunate, an era of both stability and seclusion. The nation had closed its gates to much of the outside world, practicing a policy known as sakoku, literally, the closed country. Foreign trade was severely restricted. Christianity had been banned. Japanese subjects were forbidden to travel abroad. Only a handful of Dutch and Chinese traders were allowed limited entry through the port of Nagasaki, watched over carefully by officials. To live in such a world was to exist in a land carefully shielded from the unknown, a land where the arrival of something foreign was never just curiosity. It was a potential danger, even a threat to the balance of society. Daily life for most people was quiet, centered around rice fields, fishing boats, and small crafts. Villages along the Pacific coast lived in rhythm with the ocean, pulling their livelihood from its waters, but also fearing its moods. Wooden boats and sails, made with traditional Japanese techniques, were the norm. The villagers knew the sea's ways, knew the shape of its waves, and the kinds of vessels that could endure them. Yet beyond that familiar horizon was mystery. Foreign ships, when they did appear, were sometimes seen as omens of misfortune, reminders of the world outside that Japan had chosen to shut out. Politically, the Tokugawa government was wary of anything that could disrupt its control. Foreigners were not only distrusted, they were considered dangerous, symbols of powers that might try to pry open the country's gates. Memories of European missionaries from the previous centuries lingered, along with fears of colonization, which was happening elsewhere in Asia. For villagers, these policies filtered down into instinct. To encounter something unfamiliar was to encounter something taboo. And so, when a strange vessel drifted into view on the shores of Ore, the weight of this context pressed down on the witnesses. Their world was one of order and tradition, and this sight belonged to none of it. But life was not only political, it was also spiritual. In Edo period Japan, folklore and superstition were woven into daily routines. The sea was believed to be the realm of gods and restless spirits. Shipwrecks were sometimes seen as punishments or warnings. Objects washed ashore were not simply debris. They might be messages from beyond, gifts or curses depending on how they were interpreted. In this setting, the appearance of a hollow round ship, with markings no one could read, was not just strange, but deeply uncanny. To a villager, it could easily be understood as supernatural, a vessel sent from realms unseen, carrying with it a being who might not be entirely human. The Ore coast itself, where this story takes place, was a rugged stretch, facing the Pacific, far from the bustling heart of Edo, but still tied into the shogunate's watchful system. Villagers were accustomed to fishing boats, to storms, to driftwood washing in from distant shores, but the sea also reminded them of boundaries. Beyond those waves lay the world that was forbidden. The shogunate had strict rules for dealing with castaways, both Japanese and foreign. Foreigners who landed on the shores were often not welcomed but repelled, sometimes with violence, for fear that even a single outsider could stir unrest. That fear was not always logical, but it was powerful, rooted in generations of warnings and laws. The year 1803 itself was part of a shifting time. Across the globe, change was stirring. Western nations were beginning to push harder into Asia, seeking trade routes and influence. Russian ships had been sighted in northern waters. To the average Japanese villager, such geopolitical changes were distant rumors, if they were known at all. Yet beneath the surface, the shogunate's officials were wary, aware that their country's seclusion could not last forever. Any sign of intrusion, no matter how small, was troubling. This was the fragile, tightly woven fabric into which the Utsuro bune fell. When we imagine the villagers gathered around that strange craft, we must also imagine the weight of their culture pressing in on them. The fear of breaking the laws of seclusion, the superstition of dealing with the unknown, the distrust of outsiders, and the constant presence of the ocean as both provider and threat. Their eyes were not like ours. Where we might see curiosity first, they saw taboo, danger, and the possibility of spirits. In a way, this makes the story of the Utsuro bune even more remarkable. For the villagers to have dared to approach the vessel, to look inside, and even to describe its passenger, they were stepping beyond the ordinary boundaries of their world. They were brushing against something forbidden, whether it was foreign or divine, and when the story was later written down, it carried with it not just the details of the craft, but the heavy shadows of the time in which it appeared. To picture the moment, then, is to picture more than a strange ship. It is to picture a society that prized order above all, suddenly confronted with chaos. It is to imagine a small village, caught between curiosity and fear, between the known and the unknowable. The closed country of Japan, where the outside world was kept at bay, was suddenly touched by something that could not be explained, and in that tension, the legend of the hollow ship began to grow. This is the stage upon which the Utsuro bune story unfolds. An isolated Japan, suspicious of outsiders, bound by superstition, and yet, like all human societies, forever vulnerable to the unexpected. And so when the villagers saw that round, strange craft drifting toward their shore, they did not merely see an oddity, they saw a crack in the wall of their world, an intrusion of mystery into the ordered life they had always known. When the strange vessel finally came to rest upon the sands of the Ori coast, the villagers circled around it with a mix of awe and hesitation. They were fishermen, farmers, women, and children. People who had seen storms wreck boats and send driftwood across the tides, but never had their eyes fallen on something so strange. The craft, glistening faintly in the pale daylight, was unlike any boat they had known. Accounts that survive from that day describe the vessel as round, almost like a great incense burner, or the top half of a bowl turned upside down. Its lower section was said to be reinforced with iron plates, protecting it from the sea. Some villagers compared its shape to a rice pot, the kind that sat over every household's fire, but enlarged to an impossible size. Others thought it resembled a large bell, a hollow dome sealed against the water. Whatever the comparison, none of them could recall anything so carefully built, so solid, and so mysterious in its purpose. Its surface gleamed oddly. Wooden boats were familiar. They showed the grain of timber, the seams of joinery, and the stains of salt water. This vessel, though, looked smoother, its lines more precise, its bands of iron unfamiliar in their placement. Around the middle, small windows were said to glimmer, like glass panes, though glass was rare and precious in Edo, Japan, used sparingly, even in the homes of the wealthy. The villagers pressed closer, marveling, while whispers spread. Some insisted it was a foreign shipwreck, cast across the sea from faraway lands. Others muttered that it was no ship at all, but something supernatural, perhaps a gift from the gods, or a warning from spirits. The sea, after all, was never just water. It was alive with meaning, a boundary between the human and the otherworldly. And now, here before them, was proof that something had crossed that boundary. As they examined the outer surface, their eyes caught strange markings etched along its walls. They were lines and symbols, organized like writing, yet unlike any script they knew. It was not Japanese, nor Chinese, nor any characters taught by scholars. Some thought it was decorative, others insisted it was a language, carrying messages from lands unseen. The villagers could not read it, but they felt its weight, as though the craft itself carried knowledge beyond their understanding. Summoning courage, they looked inside. What they saw would become the heart of the Utsuro bune legend. Sitting within the hollow ship was a woman. She was unlike any they had ever encountered. Her hair was long and flowing, a pale reddish brown, shining with tones rarely seen in their villages. Her skin was lighter than theirs, her face fine and delicate, her clothing woven of unfamiliar fabrics. She was described as beautiful, though in an unfamiliar way, her features foreign, her garments layered with strange textures, cut and sewn in a manner not Japanese. In her hands, she clutched a box. It was small, lacquered, perhaps made of wood or something like it, yet sealed tightly. No matter what happened, she did not let it leave her grip. Even when she moved her hands, even when she gestured, the box remained close to her body, as though it contained something of deep importance, or something she feared would be taken from her. Villagers later whispered endlessly about this box. Was it treasure? Was it a holy relic? Or was it something dangerous, the very reason she had been sent away from her people? When she looked up, her eyes met those of the villagers, and she spoke. The sound of her voice was soft, musical, yet the words carried no meaning to their ears. Her language was strange, entirely unknown, filled with rhythms and syllables they could not trace to any dialect. The villagers tried to reply in their own tongue, but she only shook her head gently, as though she wished she could understand but could not. The gap between them was wide, bridged only by gestures and cautious curiosity. Inside the vessel, the villagers also noticed unusual items. Some records mention bedding, food supplies, and containers of water. Others describe unfamiliar fabrics and materials, the kind not used in Japan at the time. These details were recorded later by scholars who collected testimony, and while not all accounts agree, they all point to a sense of strangeness. This was no ordinary fishing boat, no wrecked craft pieced together from scraps. It had been deliberately built, deliberately sealed, and carefully supplied for travel. The woman's demeanor was calm, though she seemed guarded. She never allowed the box to leave her possession, and when villagers attempted to point at it or gesture toward it, she clutched it tighter, shaking her head firmly. Some villagers speculated that she had been banished, cast away from her homeland with the box as her only belonging. A few even suggested the box contained the head of her lover, a macabre interpretation born of folklore traditions, in which women were punished for forbidden relationships. Others simply saw mystery. Whatever the object was, it mattered to her beyond words. In the accounts that remain, the villagers did not harm her. They brought food, they studied her garments, they listened to her voice, even if they could not understand. But unease lingered. She was foreign, or perhaps otherworldly, and in the climate of 1803 Japan, such an arrival was troubling. Some records suggest she was gently guided back to her vessel and allowed to drift back into the sea, sent away before her presence could attract the attention of officials. Others suggest she remained only briefly, her fate unknown. The truth is uncertain, for the documents preserve only fragments, but what is clear is that the villagers saw her, spoke of her, and remembered her enough that their words were written down for future generations. The story of the hollow ship was preserved in several Edo period texts, most notably the Tonsho Setsu and the Umi no Chiri. These were collections of tales, part historical record, part storytelling, compiled by scholars and writers who found the incident too strange to ignore. In these manuscripts, illustrations show the craft as a rounded vessel, lined with windows, and the woman as a pale figure with long hair, clutching her mysterious box. The consistency of these details across multiple sources is what makes the Utsuro bune case stand out. Unlike folklore that shifts wildly from telling to telling, this story holds its shape, as though grounded in something real. For the villagers, the memory would have been vivid: the round ship glinting in the sun, the strange woman inside, the unbroken silence of her unknown tongue. To them it was not merely a story, it was an event that had unsettled their world, one that could not be easily explained or forgotten. For us centuries later, their words open a window into that moment, letting us glimpse a beach, a crowd of startled faces, and a vessel that seems to belong to no known age. Thus the testimonies endure. A woman from nowhere, a ship from nowhere, and a mystery that refuses to vanish with time. For any story to survive the passage of centuries, it must be carried carefully, passed from voice to voice, and written in ways that give it permanence. The tale of the hollow ship might easily have slipped into the fog of forgotten rumors, fading like so many coastal legends told only by word of mouth. Yet this strange event was not only spoken about by villagers, it was written down, illustrated, and preserved in the cultural record of Japan's Edo period, a time when scholars, storytellers, and collectors of curiosities sought to capture the unusual alongside the ordinary. Several important documents contain accounts of the Utsuro bune, each offering slight variations but maintaining the central elements: a round vessel washed ashore in 1803, a strange woman inside, symbols inscribed upon the craft, and a box she held close. Among the most cited is the Ton Shazetsu, a compilation of stories gathered by Kyokute Bakken, a respected writer of the Edo era. Bakken was known for weaving both fiction and fact into his works, but his record of the hollow ship is presented in the same manner as other curious events of his time. He described the vessel's shape, the woman's features, and the mysterious writings, preserving what villagers had claimed to see. Another source is the Ume no Chiri, or Dust of the Plum, written in the early 19th century. This text provides illustrations of the vessel, showing its round form, metallic bands, and small windows. The woman within is drawn with long hair and foreign features, cradling her box as she looks outward. Such illustrations give us not only words but images, helping us picture what the villagers may have witnessed. It is striking how similar the depictions are across different manuscripts. While details sometimes differ, one text might emphasize the vessel's iron plating, another might focus more on the woman's garments. The broad strokes remain consistent. This consistency has long puzzled researchers. In folklore, stories often shift wildly from telling to telling, reshaped by each narrator's imagination. Yet here we find a tale that holds its form across multiple documents, recorded by educated men who were not present at the event, but who took care to describe what they had heard. This has led some to argue that the incident must have had a core of truth, something that impressed itself so strongly upon the villagers that their reports did not bend easily into fancy. But the Edo period was also an age when strange stories were popular. Compilations of unusual events, ghost sightings, and wonders of nature were common. People delighted in tales of the uncanny, and writers collected them much as modern publishers might gather reports of mysteries or unsolved cases. The Utsuro bune could have been treated in this same spirit, a marvel, recorded not because it was entirely believed, but because it was captivating, something to spark wonder and reflection. Readers of the time were accustomed to such curiosities, halfway between fact and allegory, written in a style that encouraged both fascination and caution. The way information traveled in Edo, Japan, also shaped the story's preservation. Without newspapers in the modern sense, tales spread through word of mouth, traveling merchants, and handwritten compilations. Woodblock prints and illustrated books served as vehicles for both entertainment and instruction. A single strange event, if it caught the imagination, could ripple outward far beyond the village where it first occurred. That the hollow ship appears in multiple sources suggests that it was not just a fleeting rumor, but a tale that carried weight, passed along from region to region, until scholars took notice. Illustrations in these manuscripts deserve special attention. They do more than decorate the text. They anchor the imagination. One can look upon the drawings of the Utsuro bune and see at once a shape that resembles, eerily, the flying saucers described in the 20th century. The round hull, the domed top, the windows, these images resonate with our modern associations, yet they were drawn long before such concepts existed. To Edo readers, the vessel would have looked strange, but conceivable, perhaps, like an elaborately built foreign craft. To us, it suggests something more uncanny, as though the past had accidentally drawn a blueprint for the mysteries of the future. It is also telling that the woman is always shown holding her box. This detail, repeated and preserved in ink, shows how strongly the villagers remembered it, or how strongly the storytellers chose to emphasize it. Even if we do not know what was inside, the image of her clutching the box became symbolic, an emblem of secrecy, of something withheld. In folklore studies, such symbols often carry deeper meaning. The box may represent forbidden knowledge, hidden power, or the burden of exile. Whether literal or symbolic, it gave the story a focal point that endured. The survival of these documents allows us to compare and analyze. Scholars in later centuries pored over them, noting both similarities and contradictions. Some emphasized the historical possibility that a foreign woman, perhaps Russian, had washed ashore, her ship mistaken for something otherworldly. Others leaned into the strangeness, pointing out the odd design of the vessel and the indecipherable script. Without these written records, the Utsuro bune would likely be dismissed today as a mere rumor, no different from countless forgotten folk tales. Instead, it stands as one of the rare legends pinned down in ink, preserved with enough detail to inspire debate, even now. And yet, the act of recording itself raises questions. Were the compilers presenting eyewitness testimony faithfully, or did they embellish for effect? Did they copy earlier versions, smoothing over inconsistencies, or did they introduce their own imagination? In a culture where storytelling was both entertainment and moral instruction, one cannot dismiss the possibility that the tale was shaped to carry meaning. Perhaps it warned against foreign contact. Perhaps it symbolized exile and loss, or perhaps it was recorded simply because it was fascinating, and the writers, like us, did not want to let the mystery vanish. In this way, the Utsuro bune hovers between history and folklore. The villagers may have seen something real, the writers may have preserved it with accuracy, or they may have altered it, consciously or not, to fit the patterns of storytelling in their age. What matters is that it endured, carried forward by ink and brush, until it reached our time. The manuscripts remain, their drawings clear, their words steady, reminding us that in 1803, along a quiet Japanese shore, something happened that refused to be forgotten. Thus the legend survived, not as a fleeting murmur, but as a story inked into the cultural memory of a nation, waiting for us to rediscover it centuries later. When we look closely at the story of the hollow ship, one silence stands out more strongly than all others: the silence of the authorities. In Edo period Japan, local officials kept careful records of strange occurrences, especially when they involved outsiders or unusual objects washing ashore. Foreign contact was a matter of deep concern. The Tokugawa shogunate, wary of foreign influence, enforced a strict isolation policy known as sakoku. Unauthorized landings of foreigners could bring suspicion, even punishment. Yet in the case of the Utsuro bune, we find almost no trace of direct official intervention. This absence has puzzled readers for generations. Why would such an event, with its unsettling details, leave so little behind in the records of power? Perhaps the authorities did investigate but chose not to publicize their findings. Perhaps they considered it unworthy of official notice, dismissing it as a curious but harmless rumor. Or perhaps they saw it as dangerous knowledge, best suppressed before it stirred unrest or fascination among the people. One explanation lies in the political climate of the time. Japan in the early 1800s was firmly closed to most foreign contact, and coastal defense was a sensitive issue. Strange vessels occasionally drifted near the shore, and each such incident raised the possibility of intrusion. If the hollow ship truly carried a foreign woman, the local officials would have faced a dilemma. To report her existence might have drawn the suspicion of higher authorities, leading to questions about whether the villagers had aided her or allowed forbidden contact. It might have been easier and safer to let the matter fade away, handled quietly at the local level, with no need for records that could later be judged harshly. Another possibility is that the officials feared the unknown. The strange craft, the indecipherable writing, the mysterious box, these details may have seemed beyond explanation. Bureaucrats, charged with maintaining order, might have preferred not to acknowledge what they could not control. To record the event formally would have given it weight. To remain silent was to reduce it to nothing more than a rumor, dissolving it into the air of uncertainty. But silence rarely ends speculation. Instead, it often deepens it. Among villagers, merchants, and travelers, the story of the hollow ship may have grown precisely because officials left no firm account. Without an authoritative version, imagination filled the gap. Was the woman a stranded foreigner, a lost princess, a visitor from another world? Each retelling carried its own answer, and in the absence of an official explanation, all seemed equally possible. Scholars who later studied the incident also noticed this silence. Some argued that it reflected deliberate censorship. In a society where information was tightly managed, the government often suppressed stories that might lead to fear or unrest. A vessel described as round, metallic, and covered in mysterious writing might have sounded too much like a supernatural omen or an unwelcome reminder of foreign presence. Better, perhaps, to erase it from the official record and allow it to survive only in folklore collections. Others have suggested a more mundane reason. The authorities simply did not see the story as important. Ships occasionally drifted from abroad, carrying the wreckage of distant lands. The woman, if she was real, may have been seen as just another castaway. If the villagers returned her to the sea, as some accounts claim, then the matter would have ended there, requiring no further action. To officials already burdened with duties of taxation, law, and order, one strange vessel may have been too minor to merit attention. Yet the absence of evidence is also what makes the Utsuro bune so haunting. If the government had left a clear record, the story might now be filed away as a solved case, interesting but explained. Instead, we are left with a void, an unanswered question suspended in the historical record, and into that void flows speculation, like water filling an empty vessel. The silence itself may even have shaped the way the story was remembered. Had officials issued a blunt report, calling it a foreign boat, and nothing more, perhaps the legend would never have grown. Instead, the hush surrounding the event allowed its more uncanny details to shine. People remembered the strangeness, not the bureaucracy. They remembered the drawings, the vessel's odd form, the mysterious woman with her box. Silence turned the hollow ship from an incident into a mystery, and from a mystery into a legend. This interplay between authority and rumor is not unique to Japan. Across cultures, unexplained events often survive in precisely this way. When official voices are absent, stories take root in the soil of uncertainty. Listeners add their own interpretations, guided by fear, wonder, or imagination. The hollow ship fits neatly into this pattern. It was too strange to vanish, too unconfirmed to settle, and so it lived on in the shadows, nurtured by speculation. To the people of the time, such speculation may have carried moral or spiritual weight. Perhaps the strange woman was a warning about foreign influence, sent by fate to remind Japan of its fragile boundaries. Perhaps she symbolized the dangers of secrecy, clutching her box that no one was allowed to open. Or perhaps she represented nothing more than the unknowable itself, a reminder that not everything could be explained, even in an orderly society. The lack of official explanation left space for these meanings to grow, allowing each listener to find significance in the silence. In our own time, the silence of the authorities continues to invite theories. Some suggest that the Utsuro bune was an early encounter with technology, not of this earth, hidden by cautious officials who could not comprehend what they saw. Others suggest that it was a mundane event, exaggerated precisely because officials ignored it. Either way, the hush of the government created the mystery as much as the vessel itself did. In the end, the silence of authority is not emptiness. It is a presence of its own, shaping memory, guiding speculation, and giving the hollow ship its ghostly aura. What the villagers saw may never be proven, but the quiet that followed their reports ensured that we would still be wondering, more than 2 centuries later, what exactly washed ashore in 1803. At the heart of the Utsuro bune mystery lies not only the strange vessel, but the even stranger figure said to be inside it, a woman unlike any the villagers had ever seen. The accounts, while varied, agree on certain striking details. She was young, perhaps in her late teens or early 20s. Her face was described as beautiful but unfamiliar, her skin pale, her features foreign in ways the villagers could not place. Some said her hair was red, a rare and almost unheard of color in Japan at the time. Others spoke of locks, tinted with a reddish hue, flowing long and carefully styled. She was not dressed as a villager would be, nor even as a foreigner the villagers might vaguely recognize from rare encounters. Instead, her clothing was made from fabrics that seemed rich, layered, and adorned in ways that defied local knowledge. Everything about her radiated a sense of difference, of origin beyond their world of rice fields and fishing boats. She carried no words that could be understood. According to the stories, she spoke in a language unlike any heard before, a tongue of strange sounds and syllables. The villagers, familiar with their own dialects, and perhaps with hints of Dutch or Chinese, heard from the distant ports, could make nothing of it. She seemed unable to understand their words in return, trapped in a silence of meaning. Yet her gestures conveyed something. She was cautious, protective, especially of the object she carried with her, a small box, clutched tightly to her chest. The box itself became almost as legendary as the woman. It was said to be made of a material the villagers did not recognize, smooth and sealed tightly. The woman never allowed it to leave her possession, refusing to show its contents, or permit anyone to touch it. Some wondered if it held precious belongings, perhaps a gift or heirloom. Others whispered that it contained something sacred or forbidden. Its secrecy gave it an aura of power, and like the vessel itself, it became a symbol of the unknowable. To the villagers, she must have seemed both wondrous and unsettling. Japan in 1803 was not accustomed to foreign visitors. Even the rare sailors who washed ashore from shipwrecks tended to look very different from this figures. And yet, despite her strangeness, she did not appear threatening. She was calm, almost serene, carrying herself with dignity. Some accounts describe her as polite, even graceful, despite her isolation within an incomprehensible language and culture. This gentleness added another layer of mystery. She was different, but not dangerous. She was unknowable, but not hostile. The presence of the woman quickly became the heart of speculation. Who was she, and where had she come from? Some later researchers have suggested that she may indeed have been a foreign castaway. Russia, after all, was expanding its presence in the northern seas, and shipwrecked travelers from Siberia or beyond occasionally drifted into Japanese waters. The reddish hair, the unfamiliar features, and the foreign language might all fit such a possibility. Her box, in this interpretation, might have held valuables, coins, jewelry, or letters, things she wished to keep safe in a land where she could trust no one. But this explanation does not settle every detail. Why then was her vessel so strange, so unlike any ship of the time? Why was her clothing described as so elaborate, so different from known styles? And why did the story linger with such a sense of the uncanny? If she were merely a foreigner, perhaps the villagers, unfamiliar with foreigners, exaggerated the difference, or perhaps something more unusual truly stood before them. Others have suggested symbolic interpretations. In Japanese folklore, mysterious women often appear as messengers, spirits, or omens. The sea itself was home to umebuzu and other creatures of legend, sometimes appearing in human form. A pale woman emerging from a hollow, otherworldly ship could easily be seen as a supernatural being, not a person at all. Her silence, her strange tongue, her insistence on guarding her box, all these traits aligned with the uncanny, with beings who straddle the border between worlds. And then, of course, there are modern theories, shaped by the lens of UFO lore. To those who study encounters with unexplained phenomena, the woman in the hollow ship resembles the archetype of a visitor, humanoid, but not entirely like us. Peaceful, but withholding secrets, surrounded by technology or objects beyond the local culture's comprehension. The Utsuro bune, in this interpretation, becomes not a boat, but a craft. The woman becomes not a foreigner, but a traveler from another realm. Her box becomes a device, perhaps containing tools, communication instruments, or something even stranger. It is worth noting, too, the emotional atmosphere of her presence. The villagers' accounts, as preserved in later retellings, do not describe panic or violence. Instead, there is awe, caution, and mystery. The woman inspires questions, not terror. This differs from many folklore tales, where strange beings bring fear or disaster. Here the strangeness is quiet, ambiguous, and unresolved. She does not attack, she does not curse, she does not bless. She simply exists, sitting inside her vessel, guarding her box, speaking words no one understands. This stillness may be part of why the story has lasted. A figure who offers no answers, who neither harms nor helps, remains in the mind long after the details of battles or storms fade. The woman of the hollow ship is an eternal question. She is the embodiment of mystery itself, beautiful, silent, unknowable, and forever beyond reach. Theories about her identity continue even in modern scholarship. Some suggest she may have been a woman of noble birth, from a distant land, banished, or exiled with her belongings sealed in the box. Others suggest she was a victim of scandal, hidden away, and cast adrift, to preserve family honor. Still others propose that she was never a real woman at all, but a symbol inserted by later writers, to give the story human focus. Yet each of these explanations, while plausible, leaves something untouched. The emotional weight of the story does not rest on explanation, but on mystery. When we think of the woman now, we must imagine not only her features, but the silence surrounding her. Imagine her sitting in the round vessel, the villagers gathered outside, peering in with wonder and unease. Imagine her eyes, meeting theirs but conveying nothing they could understand. Imagine her hands, holding the box firmly, a silent signal that some things could not be shared. In that moment, across centuries, she remains suspended, a figure both present and absent, real and unreal. And so, as the vessel drifted on, and the authorities stayed silent, the woman herself became the center of the legend. She was the heart of the mystery, the unanswered question embodied in flesh and form. Whether foreign castaway, supernatural messenger, or otherworldly traveler, she carried with her the aura of the unknowable, leaving behind only wonder and speculation. In the stillness of her presence, the Utsuro bune became more than an object. It became a story about the limits of human understanding, about how we react when confronted with the unfamiliar. And the woman, silent, beautiful, and guarded, became the eternal face of that story, the guardian of a box whose contents remain closed, just as the truth of her identity remains sealed. Over the centuries, the hollow ship of Ori has been explained in many different ways. Some see it as folklore, others as history, and still others as evidence of something far stranger. To fall asleep to this story is to drift, as the vessel itself once drifted, through the sea of interpretations, each wave carrying a new possibility. None of them cancels the others. Instead, they layer upon one another, reminding us that mystery is rarely solved by one simple answer. The first, and perhaps most grounded explanation, is that the Utsuro bune was a shipwreck from abroad, carrying a woman cast adrift. Japan's isolation policy in 1803 meant that almost any foreign presence was treated with suspicion, but geography alone made shipwrecks inevitable. To the north, Russia was beginning to explore the Pacific, sending ships into waters not far from Japan. Siberian traders, Russian sailors, or even Aleut or Ainu people could, in theory, have been swept off course. A woman with reddish hair, speaking a language the villagers could not recognize, may have been one such castaway. Her box could have held valuables, coins, religious icons, or keepsakes, which she refused to part with. In this view, the strange vessel was not an alien craft, but a kind of lifeboat or escape pod, perhaps built from unfamiliar materials, perhaps simply drawn in a way that confused local witnesses. The metal plates described on its underside may have been copper sheeting, used in European shipbuilding to protect hulls from barnacles and rot. The glass windows could have been oiled paper or translucent material mistaken for glass. From the standpoint of maritime history, this interpretation seems plausible. Castaways were not unknown, and villagers often treated them with a mix of caution and fear. Yet this explanation also leaves us with puzzles. Why would a lifeboat appear so round, so unlike anything in known design? Why would its interior contain strange inscriptions, drawings no one could decipher? And why would the woman's clothing be described as so ornate, so different from European sailors' garb? The pieces do not quite fit, and that gap between explanation and evidence is where other theories take root. Some scholars suggest that the Utsuro bune was never meant to be taken literally. Instead, they argue it was a piece of folklore, a tale written down in the style of wonder stories popular in Edo, Japan. The hollow ship appears in texts like Ton Shosetsu and Ume no Chiri, compilations of strange tales collected for entertainment. These works included ghost stories, bizarre events, and unusual natural phenomena. The Utsuro bune may simply have been one more story, crafted from imagination, intended to fascinate readers. If so, then the mysterious woman becomes a symbolic figure. She is not a real castaway, but an embodiment of the unknown. Her foreign features, her guarded box, her incomprehensible speech, all serve as metaphors for mystery itself. In this reading, the tale reflects anxieties of the time, fears of foreign influence, fears of taboo knowledge, fears of encounters that could not be controlled. Edo, Japan was an orderly society, and the hollow ship may have been a cautionary tale about what happens when disorder drifts in from beyond the horizon. But folklore rarely arises from nothing. Often it begins with a seed of reality, a strange event retold and reshaped. Even if the hollow ship was partly invention, it may have been inspired by real shipwrecks, real foreign castaways, or real objects washed ashore. Over time, details may have grown more uncanny. A wooden boat became a round vessel. A foreign woman became a silent beauty with red hair. A chest of belongings became a mysterious box that must never be opened. In this way, folklore and history blur, feeding one another until they cannot be separated. Then there is the modern lens, one shaped by the rise of UFO studies. To researchers in this field, the Utsuro bune is more than folklore or misinterpreted history. It is one of the earliest recorded encounters with a craft that does not belong to our world. The descriptions, a round, domed vessel with metallic underside and windows, bear striking resemblance to later accounts of unidentified flying objects. The strange inscriptions could be writing not of any known culture, but of another intelligence entirely. The woman, with her unusual appearance and her protective box, may have been a visitor, stranded or intentionally arriving. Some even compare her to modern accounts of close encounters, humanoid beings who look almost human, but with subtle differences that unsettle. The guarded object recalls countless stories of alien devices, hidden technologies, or communication tools. If the hollow ship were truly such a craft, it might have been damaged or misdirected, forced to land on the Japanese coast, centuries before the modern UFO era began. Critics of this view argue that it projects modern ideas backward, reading UFOs into a story that was never meant to carry such meaning. Yet it is precisely the uncanny details that invite such projection. How could villagers in 1803 have described technology they had never seen? How could they have explained a visitor so different from themselves? Their language, of boats, of wood, of glass, may have been the only way to capture something far beyond their experience. Other, more symbolic theories also exist. Some scholars read the woman as a metaphor for taboo relationships. In certain versions, the story hints that she may have been cast adrift because of a scandalous affair, banished by her family or society. Her box, in this interpretation, could contain the severed head of her lover or evidence of her shame. The villagers' refusal to open it reflects cultural taboos, while her drift to shore symbolizes the way secrets eventually surface. Such readings show how a story can serve as allegory, carrying social lessons in its imagery. In the end, none of these explanations fully resolve the mystery. Each shines light on one part while leaving shadows over another. The historical view explains her foreignness, but not the vessel's strangeness. The folkloric view explains the vessel's strangeness, but not the vividness of the reports. The UFO view explains the vessel's uncanny details, but stretches the evidence into speculation. And the symbolic view explains the box and her silence, but not the villagers' drawings or the persistence of the tale across sources. Perhaps the strength of the Utsuro bune lies precisely in this resistance to resolution. It sits between history and folklore, between the mundane and the extraordinary. To approach it only as fact is to miss its symbolism. To approach it only as symbol is to miss its uncanny realism. To approach it only as UFO evidence is to ignore its place in Edo culture. And yet all these perspectives together create a richer tapestry, one that carries both wonder and depth. As we listen to the competing theories, we find ourselves drifting like the vessel itself, never settling, always circling, caught between shores. This is the rhythm of mystery, not closure, but suspension. The hollow ship does not deliver answers, it delivers questions, each one reflecting the anxieties, hopes, and imaginations of those who interpret it. In this way, the Utsuro bune is less a solved puzzle than a mirror, showing us how human beings respond to the unknown, across centuries and across cultures. The hollow ship of Owari may have first drifted ashore in 1803, but in many ways its voyage never ended. The vessel has sailed quietly through the centuries, carried not by tides but by words, sketches, and speculation. In the modern era, long after the villagers had passed and the Tokugawa shogunate had fallen, the story of the Utsuro bune found new life, attracting researchers, folklorists, and eventually UFO enthusiasts. Each group, with its own methods and biases, tried to peel back the layers of the mystery. What they discovered was not one truth, but a mosaic of interpretations, each shaped by the questions of its time. The earliest modern researchers to revisit the tale were folklorists in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. They encountered the Utsuro bune not as eyewitness testimony, but in collections of Kidman, Edo period strange tales that blended folklore, rumor, and local happenings. For these scholars, the hollow ship was first and foremost literature. They compared it to other Japanese folk tales of mysterious visitors, noting how often women from the sea appeared in stories, sometimes as blessings, sometimes as omens. In their eyes, the Utsuro bune was part of a cultural pattern, a symbol of Japan's complex relationship with the ocean, both source of life and channel of intrusion. Yet even in these folkloric studies, the specific details of the drawing stood out. Unlike most folk tales, which were vague in description, the Utsuro bune was illustrated with surprising care. The vessel's round form, its dome top, its unusual markings, all were preserved in sketches that modern readers could still examine. These details made the story harder to dismiss as pure imagination. The folklorists recorded the tale as part of Japan's storytelling tradition, but they also admitted that its vividness was unusual, hovering on the edge between fiction and report. By the mid-20th century, as UFO sightings became part of global consciousness, the Utsuro bune was rediscovered by an entirely different audience. Researchers in the field of ufology began pointing to the 1803 account as one of the earliest written descriptions of a craft resembling a flying saucer. To them, the similarities were uncanny. A round vessel, metallic plating, windows, inscriptions that looked like unknown writing. These were the very features reported in countless modern UFO cases. Even the presence of a humanoid figure, female in this instance, fit into the emerging pattern of close encounter stories. Writers in the 1960s and 1970s, particularly during the peak of UFO fascination, highlighted the Utsuro bune as evidence that such phenomena had been occurring for centuries, long before modern technology or science fiction could influence witnesses. They argued that the Japanese villagers described the craft in the only terms available to them, as a boat, but that the details revealed its true nature. In this interpretation, the Utsuro bune was not a folktale, but a historical record of contact with an unidentified aerial phenomenon. Not all scholars agreed. Skeptics pointed out that the story's placement in collections of strange tales suggested it was never meant as factual reporting. They noted that round ships were sometimes depicted in Japanese art, and that the supposed inscriptions might have been stylized decoration misunderstood by later readers. To them, the Utsuro bune was less about aliens and more about the imaginative culture of Edo Japan, where curiosity about the exotic often mingled with superstition. Still, the debate did not settle. Instead, it expanded. Historians began to consider the Utsuro bune in light of Japan's geopolitical situation in the early 19th century. Could the strange woman have been a Russian, her vessel some kind of emergency escape craft? Could the villagers' descriptions, shaped by unfamiliarity, have transformed practical features into uncanny ones? This line of thought grounded the story in the real tensions of the time, when Japan's isolation was being tested by foreign powers. Meanwhile, cultural theorists looked at the story less as history and more as symbol. They pointed out that the Utsuro bune reflects themes of boundary and intrusion. The sea, in Japanese thought, marked the edge of the known world. Something arriving from beyond it was always a disruption, whether foreigner, spirit, or omen. The silent woman with her guarded box embodied the unknowable, something that could never be fully integrated into the villagers' ordered world. From this perspective, the tale was not about technology or aliens at all, but about how societies imagine and process the unfamiliar. In recent decades, the story has gained new layers of visibility. Documentaries, books, and online discussions often revisit the hollow ship, framing it as one of the world's enduring unsolved mysteries. Artists reinterpret the vessel in paintings and digital renderings, sometimes emphasizing its metallic gleam, sometimes leaning into its folkloric softness. The woman, too, appears in art, pale, solemn, and always clutching her mysterious box. Through these retellings, the Utsuro bune continues to inspire, its imagery proving as durable as its questions. Japanese researchers themselves remain divided. Some maintain that the story is a folk tale, valuable more as cultural expression than as evidence. Others leave the door open, noting that the level of detail does not quite match the style of typical myth. Even within Japan, the Utsuro bune shifts between categories: folklore, history, and legend. That shifting nature may be why it continues to fascinate. Beyond academic circles, the story has filtered into popular culture. It appears in manga, in novels, in video games, often transformed but always recognizable. The themes resonate with modern audiences: the arrival of the unknown, the silent figure who carries secrets, the vessel that does not belong. In a world still filled with unanswered questions about the universe, the Utsuro bune serves as an early echo of the same wonder and unease that UFOs stir today. What is perhaps most striking is how each generation reads the story through its own lens. For the villagers of 1803, it was a strange and perhaps troubling intrusion into their secluded lives. For 19th-century folklorists, it was a curious tale of the sea. For mid-20th century UFO researchers, it was evidence of extraterrestrial contact. For 21st century readers, it is all of these at once: folklore, history, mystery, and cultural mirror. The hollow ship has become a vessel not only of mystery, but of meaning, carrying whatever questions each age pours into it. And so, the Utsuro bune continues to float, not on waves but in the currents of imagination. It is studied in classrooms, debated in forums, whispered in paranormal circles, and reimagined in art. Its voyage is endless, Because its destination is not ashore but the human mind. The vessel does not deliver answers. It delivers wonder, curiosity, and the gentle unease of the unknown. In the stillness of night, as the waves of sleep rise and fall, the Utsuro bune reminds us that mysteries endure not because they are solved, but because they refuse to be. The woman with her box, the strange round craft, the silence of the authorities, these images linger, alive in the cultural tide. Each retelling sets the vessel adrift once more, carrying it into new ears, new minds, new dreams. The story of the hollow ship, once carried by rumor along the shores of Hitachi Province, now drifts quietly across the world. Though more than 2 centuries have passed since that strange craft was said to arrive, its ripples have not faded. Instead, they have spread outward, touching minds in every age, awakening the same timeless questions. What lies beyond the horizon? What waits beyond the borders of our knowing? The Utsuro bune endures because it speaks not only of one woman or one vessel, but of something larger, the human experience of encountering mystery. In every culture, there are stories of arrivals from beyond, strangers who step from the sea, messengers who fall from the sky, visitors who bring both fear and fascination. The hollow ship is Japan's echo of this universal theme, a reminder that across all lands, people have gazed into the unknown and woven tales to hold what they could not explain. What makes this legend so enduring is not certainty, but ambiguity. If the villagers had understood the woman, if her box had been opened, if the authorities had explained her origin, the tale would have ended as quickly as it began. Instead, it remains open, a door never fully closed. That openness gives the story its power. It allows imagination to flow into the spaces where knowledge stops, to keep the vessel forever afloat in the sea of human thought. In many ways, the Utsuro bune reflects the nature of mystery itself. The craft came suddenly, it lingered briefly, and then it was gone. So too with the mysteries that shape our lives. They arrive unbidden, they resist explanation, and they leave us with more questions than answers. Yet even in their elusiveness, they enrich us. They remind us that not everything is ours to master, that wonder survives where certainty cannot reach. The woman at the heart of the tale remains its most haunting figure. She spoke no words, shared no story, and yet she became unforgettable. Her silence was not emptiness, but presence, a quiet that said more than explanations ever could. She reminds us that some truths are not meant to be spoken, only carried. Her box, forever unopened, becomes a perfect symbol of the hidden, the unknowable, the secrets each life carries across the tide of time. And then there is the sea, always the sea. In Japan, it has long been a place of both nourishment and danger, of openness and vulnerability. It is boundary and bridge, keeping the world out even as it connects to distant shores. That the Utsuro bune came from the sea feels inevitable, for the ocean itself is the great symbol of mystery, its depths still holding more secrets than the stars. To watch something rise from its surface is to glimpse the unknown made visible. Today we live in an age of technology, where satellites map the globe, where data flows ceaselessly, where explanations seem always within reach. And yet the Utsuro bune persists. Why? Because even now, even with all our tools and knowledge, mystery has not vanished. It lingers at the edges, in the vastness of space, in the depths of the sea, in the quiet strangeness of our own dreams. The hollow ship is a reminder that the unknown is not an obstacle to be defeated, but a companion to be cherished. For those who seek to sleep with this story, the Utsuro bune offers a gentle kind of comfort. It is not a tale of horror or danger, but of wonder. A ship arrives, a woman appears, the villagers watch in awe, and then the vessel drifts away. No harm comes, no battle is fought, no tragedy falls. What remains is only a sense of strangeness, soft and persistent, like the murmur of waves on a quiet shore. To fall asleep with this story is to drift with that vessel, to let the questions carry you gently outward into the wider ocean of dreams. Perhaps that is the true gift of the Utsuro bune. It does not demand belief or disbelief. It does not insist on explanation. It simply offers itself, like a shell left upon the sand. You may pick it up, turn it over, listen to the echo inside. You may wonder at the hand that placed it there, or simply admire the shape it has taken. The legend is not an answer but an invitation to curiosity, to reflection, to the quiet recognition that we are all, in some way, voyagers in a hollow ship of our own. As you imagine the vessel now, picture it drifting again upon the waves. The wood is weathered but whole. The dome gleams softly in the moonlight. The symbols shimmer like patterns of tide and wind. Inside, the woman sits in silence, her hands resting on the box that never opens. She does not speak, yet her presence fills the space with a calm that is neither threat nor comfort, but something deeper, a reminder of how vast the unknown truly is. The villagers watch from the shore, just as we do across the centuries. They do not know what to make of her, and neither do we. And that is all right. Some things are meant to remain questions. Some mysteries are meant to drift. In the hush of night, as your eyes grow heavy, and the tide of sleep rises, let the hollow ship carry you, not toward an answer but toward wonder. Let it remind you that the sea of mystery is endless, and that to float upon it is not to be lost, but to be part of something greater than yourself. The Utsuro bune came once, long ago, and vanished, but in truth, it never left. It sails still, through words, through dreams, through the quiet places of the mind, and perhaps, if you listen closely tonight, you may hear it again, the gentle creak of wood, the hush of waves, and the unbroken silence of the woman with her secret box. A vessel on an endless journey, a story without an end, a mystery that belongs to us all. As we come to the end of the story of the hollow ship, it is worth pausing, as the villagers once paused, to watch the vessel drift away. We have followed it from the shores of Hitachi, through centuries of retelling, across the waters of folklore and scholarship, through the speculations of UFO researchers, and the imaginations of countless readers and listeners. And still, as the story glides beyond our reach, it does not feel finished. That perhaps is its truest nature, to resist conclusion, to invite us to linger in the gentle tension between the known and the unknown. The Utsuro bune is not just a tale of one strange vessel. It is a mirror of humanity's relationship with mystery itself. Whenever something unexplained brushes against our world, we gather around it, we tell stories, we draw pictures, we pass the memory onward, and in doing so we weave the unknown into the fabric of our lives. The villagers in 1803 may not have understood what they saw, but by recording it, they ensured it would live on, not as an answer, but as a question carried across generations. There is something calming in that thought. Too often, modern life urges us toward certainty, toward solutions, toward quick dismissal of anything that does not fit the familiar frame. But the hollow ship reminds us that mystery can be embraced, not solved. It can be allowed to exist as mystery, quietly, peacefully, like a light flickering on the horizon. To rest in that space is to give ourselves permission to wonder, to breathe, to let go of the need for resolution. As you drift towards sleep, imagine again the scene. A cold morning, the villagers gathered at the shore, their voices hushed, as the round vessel rocks gently against the waves. Inside sits the woman, silent, guarded, yet not hostile. She holds her box close, as if it contains the essence of the unknown itself. The villagers do not open it. They simply watch, and then they let her go. In that simple act lies a profound lesson, that sometimes the greatest wisdom is not in grasping, but in releasing. The sea receives the vessel once more. The waves close around it, carrying it away into distance. Soon, it becomes a speck on the horizon. Soon after, it vanishes, but the impression it leaves behind remains, rippling through time, through words, through our imagination tonight. The woman may be gone, but her silence lingers. The box may never open, but its weight is felt. The vessel may disappear, but the mystery sails on. There is also a gentleness in knowing that the villagers were not harmed. This is not a story of conquest or disaster. No warship came, no calamity followed, only wonder, only questions. Perhaps that is why it has become such a perfect tale for sleep. It stirs the imagination without disturbing the heart. It reminds us that not all mysteries are threats. Some are simply visitations, quiet and fleeting, meant only to remind us of how vast the world truly is. In your own life, there may be mysteries you carry, unanswered questions, unresolved paths, unopened boxes of memory or dream. The story of the Utsuro bune whispers that it is all right to let them drift. You do not have to open every box. You do not have to solve every puzzle. You can watch, acknowledge, and release, trusting that the sea will carry them where they belong. In this way, the hollow ship becomes more than a legend. It becomes a metaphor for peace, the peace of acceptance, the peace of letting go. So as the night deepens, allow yourself to float with the vessel. Picture yourself inside it, safe beneath its dome, the sea rocking you with its endless rhythm. Hear the waves brushing against its sides, steady, calm, unhurried. Above, the stars are bright but distant, silent companions to your journey. Ahead lies only horizon, soft and endless. And within, you carry a box of your own, not heavy, not frightening, simply private. You hold it gently, knowing it does not need to be opened tonight. The Utsuro bune sails onward, into dream. The woman remains silent, her mystery intact, her story eternal. And you too may sail with her now, across the quiet waters of sleep. Let the questions drift, let the shore fall away, let the sea cradle you as it has cradled countless voyagers before. Somewhere out there, the hollow ship still floats, waiting for those who are willing to watch, without needing to understand. In that space, between explanation and imagination, between shore and sea, between waking and sleep, the Utsuro bune lives on, a vessel without origin, a woman without words, a story without end. And as you close your eyes tonight, it becomes your vessel, carrying you gently into the mysteries of dream, where every horizon opens, and every question is free to drift forever.